Today's podcast has been influenced by an article that caught mine and Frankie's eye over on The Athletic is about Graham Potter's time at West Ham so far. But there's a couple of interesting talking points to take from it. Frankie, I think we should start with, I guess, what has grabbed the headlines as such and is doing the rounds on social media. That there's been a few fights within the West Ham dressing room under Graham Potter. Obviously, spoke about how there was some under Lopetegui, but it's continued into Graham Potter's reign as well. We've not actually discussed the article between us. I've read it, you've read it. So this is our raw discussion, if you like. So I'm looking forward to it. What's your take on the arguments / fisticuffs?
Yeah, difficult to be honest. There's not always everyone going to be seeing eye to eye, and things happen. I guess the big talking point of it is where does the finger get pointed, and who's ultimately to blame, and whose responsibility is it that these things don't happen or are managed in the right way. We were told that Potter's done his whatever qualifications in psychology, and he's this perfect, or not perfect, but very good manager. Well, this is where he then earns his crust, isn't it? This is where, this is what he's paid to do, is not just put a team out on the pitch, but it's also making sure that we have a happy camp and everyone's managed in the right way. And when these things develop, the manager's there to sort them out and make sure that, they get addressed. So we all see it slightly differently in terms of responsibility of manager, players, and so on. And it's almost like a 50-50 divide. You have some people who go, the players are to blame for everything. It's always the players. It's on the players. They're the ones who are out there. They're the ones who are on the pitch. And then people like me, who's in management and stuff like that, and run businesses, it's no, the buck stops with the manager. The manager's always the one who has to take the blame for anything that's going on. And if he's allowing these differences, these sometimes it's groups, and I've been in offices, Gio, before, where you've got little cliques that develop. Yeah. And then it's up to you to divide that and however you approach that. And some people would go in and pull those people apart and move them around or change departments. Other people would handle it totally differently. So there's all different styles for managing this stuff. But there was something that I don't know how many people saw this. I was sitting right behind the dugout at the weekend, and the Tottenham left back, Jed Spence.
Yep.
So I don't know what that man's problem was. Really don't want that man. He would not pick up a ball, even if it was 5 yards away from him. He would stand there and wait for either the ball boy to give it to him. In the end, one of the West Ham bench had to run over, pick up a ball to hand it to him. That's the problem, Gio. Break it all down. Forget about getting into conversations of Potter and West Ham, right? The biggest problem we've got in football is that attitude right there. Why that man has to have the ball literally handed to him for him to take a throw-in is absolutely mental. The West Ham fans were getting so annoyed with it and so angry, and you just felt like shouting out to him and saying, who do you actually think you are? Who are you to stand there and not be prepared to walk literally a couple of yards to pick up a football? Who actually are you, mate? Because at the end of the day, you're just a footballer, and we're all here paying your wages. And at the end of the day, you think that you're so much better than the ball boy, than you think you're this person who's so high up on a pedestal that you shouldn't have to pick up a football to do a throw-in. And that's the reason why we are where we are. That's why we keep on having so many arguments in changing rooms, because a lot of these players these days are totally and utterly so in another world that there's just no humility to them. They all think they know better. They all think they're bigger than the football club. They all think they're better than the manager. And that's why we end up where we are. And for all of the sort of, I don't think I've been overly critical of Potter. I know people say, I've got it in for him and everything else. I don't think I have. I think
I think there's people who are.
Yeah, I've just called it how I've seen it so far. And I have to give him his due here that I don't envy what he's having to try and deal with and what he's having to try and manage. It probably is a real difficult job. We know we've had these characters from previous managers who can make life really difficult for the manager, and are just very difficult to deal with. And, you know, it's up to him now to make sure that those people are moved on in the right way and in the best way that it can be for West Ham. And it's up to him to bring in the right type of characters through recruitment. Well, this is the problem, Joe. It's probably not up to him, is it? At the end of the day, we knew, you know, Moyes had this sort of situation where he didn't actually want to sign players because he didn't want to upset the apple cart. Moyes was actually nervous about signing players, you know, because he didn't want them to come in and affect the team morale, the team mentality, the squad dynamics. He didn't want that change. So Moyes was always reluctant to bring in personnel in for that reason. We actually need to clear some out, and then we've got to bring people in who are just to have a better mindset and actually want to get out there and play football and want to listen and all get on board with what the manager wants to do.
Yeah, I think generally, it was something Moyes was good at. It caused delays sometimes when signing players, and it was frustrating. But I think myself and Gonzo labelled it the Moyes MOT test that players had to sort of go through. But he was very sort of determined to bring in the right character to fit into the group. And I think the harmony under Moyes' squad looked good, even though, like, you know, when we won in Prague, you look at that squad, there's a lot of likable people within that squad, even if they weren't necessarily the best players in the world. Like Fanals wasn't in the team at that point. Tilo Kehrer was in and out of the team as well, but very likable people. I don't blame Potter in the slightest for this. Potter's got absolutely no blame for me. I think he's inherited this issue, which was there in a big thing under Lopetegui. We heard about the arguing and the fighting sometimes between Lopetegui and the players as well. So I think Potter's inherited a lot of these problems, and it's going to take time to get it right. He joined during the transfer window. He was never going to suss it out in the first couple of weeks. And you'd imagine that for our first couple of weeks, players would be able to put on a bit of a mask to some extent. Oh, new manager, I'll pretend I'm Mr. Nice Guy. But slowly the mask would slip. And I love and hate this. I hate the fact, and this is my issue here. My issue isn't actually that there's fighting. I love that. The fact that the players are calling each other out and they're holding each other and saying, this isn't good enough. I like that. I'd be worried that if everyone's going into the changing room after the form we're in at the minute and the season we're having, they're going in there high-fiving each other, saying, brilliant, well done today, boys. 1-1 against Southampton, superb. Let's go again next week. That would concern me more than people going in and saying, oh, that's not good enough. You're not good enough. What's going on? I want accountability. I don't want them punching the living daylights of each other, but actually a bit of arguing is not necessarily a bad thing. I think it can be quite healthy, and we need leadership. We need big characters. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean there isn't there. It just means that there's arguments. But I'm not against that at this point. It will need to be fixed. But between now and the summer transfer window, it doesn't really bother me because what we're protecting, the bit I hate the most out of all this is the fact it gets leaked. I'm really against this sort of stuff coming out. And I know people say, well, you're doing a podcast about it. We haven't put it out there. It was in The Athletic, which is a huge publication, and it's going around on social media. So it's like, I imagine most people listening to this podcast have already seen these rumors and whatever elsewhere before tuning in. I hate the fact this has been leaked. I think the changing room, what goes on in the changing room stays in the changing room. The two players that are at it leave them. Because I remember I think it was Moyes. I could have the manager wrong, but my gut was it was Moyes. I remember James Collins swinging for Michail Antonio because we were having a team meeting. We were in a relegation battle. We had the team meeting, and Antonio was late. And Ginger Pelly was like, what on earth are you doing? Like, this is important. And they started arguing, and Ginge went for him. Well, 2 minutes later, they're kissing, making up, and they're mates again. It doesn't bother me. But my issue is that this gets leaked. And I just think deal with it behind closed doors, keep it behind closed doors, have your argument, have your handbags, and make up at the end of it, get everything off your chest, get out your system, and move on tomorrow. So that's what I've got to say on it. I don't see it as a bad thing necessarily, Frankie, as long as it doesn't spiral out of control. And I guess there's a difference between a bad egg and an argument, isn't there? Do you know there's someone that's causing problems all the time? That's an issue. But let's just say Jared Bowen and Thomas Souček went in the change room. This is purely hypothetical. These players have not been named, and they started arguing after a match, and they were mates again tomorrow. I don't see that as a bad thing at all. In fact, I think it's very healthy. Anything else you'd like to talk about in regards to that aspect of the article before we move on to the next aspect of it?
Yeah, no, not really. Again, I just think we all have our own opinions on how to deal with it, and it's interesting that I quite like a rule with an iron fist approach. I think that's the best way to curb any of these sort of scenarios. And ultimately, you know, they can be arguing all they want. But for me, a leader turns around to them and says, look, if you've got problems, air them to me, and I'll tell you how I feel about it. And if you've got a problem, talk to me about it, and I'll tell you whether actually, no, I think, you know, this is how it should be, or I've heard what you're saying. Let's go and I feel like we need to address something. So I always prefer that.
I think Moyes definitely had leaders on his coaching staff as well, with Kevin Nolan there especially. I think you can imagine he'd be someone that was quite. And we had a long captain with Mark Noble, and then Declan Rice took over. And I remember when he was first captain, it was sort of suggested maybe he was a little bit too nice and Mr. One of the lads kind of thing. Could he step up into that role? And by the end of it, I think he had. And I think there's maybe an element of that with Bowen, which is when he first became captain, he's a bit too quiet and a bit too nice. Can you grow into that role where you maybe are a little bit tougher, you are a little bit louder, you do take more control? Time will tell, but it does. I think everything Potter needs for having a blank slate in the summer in terms of getting rid of players and bringing players in. I think everything that you need, he's got. You've got bad performances, got bad results, players' contracts expiring, players wanting to leave. Now we've got this. Pretty much anyone, bar a handful of players, could be sold from West Ham this summer, and it just gives Potter free will, really, do what you want. And speaking of that, this is the bit that caught my eye the most out of the article. The whole fighting thing, I'd imagine it happens at most teams, most weeks. So it's something I discard. I don't think it's a big deal too much. I think it becomes a big deal when players become isolated, whether they're left out of the group or left out of the team. And there's certainly a big question mark over Edson Alvarez at the minute because he's been missing for a few weeks. In the Brighton pre-match press conference, Potter said, he's injured for this one. He'll be back next week, alluding to the Spurs game, and he's still not back. It's hard not to put two and two together and assume Edson Alvarez is maybe one of the players that could be involved in the arguments. Now, that's just my own interpretation of it, but I'm looking at the evidence here, and he's been excluded or he's picked up an injury and he's out for longer than anyone's telling us. I'm just a bit skeptical when it comes to these things. I get a bit suspicious. But at the end of the article, Potter said, it's hard to say at the moment, he said, when asked about how much change he anticipates there being. I think I wouldn't want to quantify it. There's a saying, isn't there? If you can't change people, change people. We have to make decisions that make sure the club is in a better place going forward. We're working with the players we have. We're working all the time to try and get to the level we want. And I think that's the first time Frankie Potter's maybe alluded to there being big changes in the summer, although he tries to play it down. I think in the past he's played it down a lot more by saying, there's not much work to be done, blah, blah, blah. With that, I don't think he's hinting at that at all. I think he's trying to hint at the opposite, which is, well, that line's key, isn't it? If you can't change people, like their mentality or whatever, change people, get them out the door.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? But again, I think sometimes it is down to the manager to have to try and change people. And I'll give you a perfect scenario here. Connor Coventry leaves West Ham, goes to Charlton. In the starting lineup at the beginning of the season, plays a few games. I arranged to have a nice meal with his family while one of the matches is on. We all get down there, all expecting Connor to be starting. Team comes out, not even in the squad. And really shocking. You could tell it really took him back. But the manager turned around to him and said, you're not doing the things that I need you to do. I don't care where you've come from, what your status is, what your reputation is, whether or not you're the highest paid player at this football club or whatever. You've played a few games, you've looked okay, but there are some real key instructions that I feel like I've given you and you've not done them. So he's out the squad. You know, the manager didn't care whether it's embarrassing for him, didn't care how he, you know, that situation is. He said and he even come out in public and turned around and said that, you know, this is how I expect people to be. This is what I need from people. And Charlton were going through a little bit of a bad time at the beginning of the season, and look at where they are now. They went on a run back end of the season that, you know, would have won them the league if they had have carried that on the whole way through and had started the season out of left, you know, gone into the second half of it. And it really set the tone and it set the standard that was expected. And while he was really stern, you know, he obviously, I don't know what happens after that. I don't know now what happens on the training ground. I don't know about the follow-up conversations. And it wouldn't be right of me to turn around and air them on here anyway. But all of a sudden, working hard, grafting, starts doing the things, back in the team, now as one player's player of the season. Now, he's one player's player of the season for a reason. Who knows about football more than anyone? It's the players who are playing with their teammates, and they see much closer what's going on the pitch than what the supporters do. And there's a reason why they voted for him. And that's someone who he handled in a way and turned them around and made them end up being one of the most important players towards the back end of the season, one of the most important players for the team, squad, performances, and now they're in the playoffs. So, you know, managing players is a real interesting thing. And at the weekend, you saw that there was a mistake, right? Almost similar to the mistake that Kilman did for West Ham. Almost carbon copy in the Charlton game. And it was, in fact, it was probably worse. It was probably a bigger mistake than the Kilman one. And it put them 1-0 down. You saw multiple players go over and reassure the guy who made the mistake and picked his head up. And it showed a real togetherness. It showed a real team spirit. I didn't feel that in our game at the weekend. And I know it's a bit different. They're, you know, senior players, Premier League players. You can say, well, maybe they don't need an arm put round them, whatever. But I think it's really important. And I feel like we had that previously, and it's just been lost a little bit at the moment. And it would be really easy to sit here and say, and this is the problem, that, well, if they don't want to play and the head's not right, then don't play them. Well, that has an issue with the board, and I guess the board will ask questions. Why are we paying significant wages? Why are you not able to get their head straight? Why are they not able to be part of the team? If you then leave them out, then the people who they have relationships with then has a knock-on effect on the other players who are friends with them, and then they start to get angry, and the whole thing just escalates and spirals out of control. And it does get to a point where the manager's actually got to turn around and say, if I've done everything I can, if I've really, you know, left them out of the squad, told them what it is that they need to do, and they're still not able to do it, they're still not able to turn their mindset around, they're still not able to apply what I want them to apply on the football pitch, then tough, difficult decisions need to be made. And ultimately, you know, no player is bigger than the club. I think this is a little bit part of why the Premier League struggles and teams struggle with finding managers now. Man United, great example, is that the players often have achieved more than the manager has in their entire career. And the players look at them and think, well, why should I listen to you? I've already done more than you've done in your entire career in football. Well, what am I listening to you for? So it's very difficult. And I know some people say, you know, you don't need proof, or you don't need a manager who's been at the top, and it doesn't need to be, they didn't need to be successful in football for them to necessarily be a manager. And I do understand that. But I think when you get to the top level, it does play a bit of a part. And, you know, it's, many people tried with certain characters. Another perfect example, Ravel Morrison. Many people tried with Ravel Morrison. Yeah. He couldn't be turned. And at the end of the day, if they can't, then rather than having them around and causing issues and unrest, then unfortunately, no matter how talented they are, no matter how much you believe that they can, be a superstar, it's just not going to work out, and you have to let them go. So, we're all sitting here, and I said I wanted Edson Alvarez at the weekend if his head was in the right place. If it's not, then you have to accept the manager's decision. And that's why, regardless of what I feel about Potter and whether or not I feel he should be given full backing, I think there's a difference between allowing him to have a transfer window and going, here's a war chest, go and do a complete rebuild,
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think there's a big difference by saying to him, here's 100 million, spend it how you want, compared to saying, what do you want? And we're going to go find you those players. So that we, I completely agree. There's a complete
But I will
difference.
give him absolutely full backing that even if he turned around and I said that I think Mohammed Kudus's potential is like ultimate superstar, world-class level. I think he's fantastic, but he isn't quite applying it as he should do at the moment. If Potter says, well, I don't think I can bring the best out of him and it's just not working, he's got to go, and he's got to go. And then you have to back him for that. And you say, okay. So, I'm very much in a place where if he's telling us that there are players who just aren't right and aren't the good fit for what he needs at the moment, then they've got to be moved on. And I don't think there's a single player other than Jared Bowen who I would be upset or angered about if he turned around and just said they've got to go and that's it. So if he's got to change the personnel, then he's absolutely got my full support for doing so in the summer.
Yeah, it's I'm kind of an all or nothing guy anyway. Like in my life, that's why even when it comes to like arranging a night out, I need to either organize it all or have nothing to do with it. You tell me where and when to turn up, and I'll be there, and that's it. I can't do. Oh, could you sort these two people? And I'll sort. No, I'm not having that. It's all or nothing for me, and I'm a bit like that when it comes to football as well. And usually, it is. It's cheaper to change a manager than the players. If a team's underperforming, just sack the manager and change the manager. I don't know. Maybe it's £5 million. Well, it's going to cost West Ham a heck of a lot more money this summer to back Graham Potter by changing the player personnel to make them suit what he wants. But it is interesting. If you can't change people, That's a very interesting line. Now, I don't disagree with it, but I think it's the first time I feel like I've heard him resigned to not working with certain people. Now, we don't know who those are. Again, I read it. I wouldn't have been the only one that read it and thought Edson Alvarez, because there's not really anyone else he's taken out of the team, just discarded completely. Yes, Rodriguez is on his way out the door and Danny Ings, but is it because he can't change them? Well, I would argue it's just because they're just not good enough for this team. Edson Alvarez absolutely is good enough to play for West Ham, but he's not around. And I just find it it could be a pure coincidence. I ain't buying it. So I think West Ham are at the point now of almost like a break glass, push the fire alarm button. We are there, and it's not like the team needs tweaked. I think the team needs overhauled. So I'm looking, and this is confirmation bias, I'm looking for encouragement from Graham Potter, which says, don't worry, there's going to be a lot of changes at West Ham this summer, because that's what I'm desperate to see. I want to see a complete new midfield. I know we need a striker. Personally, I'd like to see a keeper. I know we ain't going to get one, but I'd like to see one. But I want reassurance there's going to be big changes. And when I read that article, it started off obviously critical and negative of Graham Potter, which is fair. It's hard to be positive about it at the minute with what's being produced. But when I read that a bit at the end, I thought over all that article, it's quite a big one as well. It's a long article. That last paragraph I read, and I thought, good, that's what I want to see. I want to hear Potter speaking about, I've had enough. I've worked with them for 4 or 5 months now. I've decided, I've made my mind up. I've had enough. Certain players are on their way, and I'm going to replace them. Brilliant. Let's have it. Can we rewind to Sunday just quickly then, Frankie? You went off to the game with your lad. What did you make of the match?
Just felt, it didn't feel like a bad result. He was certainly having one of those games. It started off the first 15 minutes, I thought we looked pretty good. I was happy with the first 15 minutes. I thought first 15 we're on top. I thought, you know, we'll nick a goal in a minute. I thought it was coming. I didn't think they looked particularly good. And yeah, I was really positive. Then the mistake was really disappointing. But we didn't let ourselves get too downbeat, and it always felt like we was going to get a goal before half time. It did feel that way. I thought Wan-Bissaka was brilliant. I thought we had a really good first half. I was really impressed. But then the second half went a bit flat. I just feel like it didn't happen. We didn't kick on. And I just felt like they were there for the taking. I really, really did feel like they were there for the taking. And I feel like I felt like the changes come a bit too late. I felt like Füllkrug was done by sort of about 60, 65 minutes. I thought a change could be made. And yeah, I just felt like the substitutes could have come a little bit earlier. As you said in your post-match, or whether it was the morning after, I was disappointed Guilherme didn't see the pitch, because I felt like his energy could have really added something. I felt like we'd got a little bit flat, and it needed a spark of energy and pace, and we just needed that to come on. Bringing Ferguson on, I didn't understand. I never felt like that was going to make the difference. So yeah, just a bit odd, but it just sort of petered out in the end. And while it didn't necessarily feel like a bad result, and you come away from Tottenham 1-1, normally you think, yeah, that's absolutely fine. But it just felt like a little bit disappointing that it wasn't the Tottenham. It wasn't a good Tottenham. It was quite a weakened, quite a poor Tottenham side, and I just felt like we could have. I don't think it would have taken much to beat them. But
no, I don't think it would.
We didn't give it.
Yeah, the one you've just reminded me, actually, when you were speaking about leadership earlier, and you were talking about, you know, the players supporting a Charlton player that made a mistake. I felt we did that with Lucas Paqueta, you know, when he had his moment where he was distraught, really. I thought Bowen and Füllkrug, spoke to the referee and tried to say to the referee, just take a breather. Don't give him a second yellow here. Just take a breather. Then Füllkrug went over, and Souček, Bowen was around Paqueta, and Bowen was grabbing him, speaking to him, and Kilman was there as well. So I thought we rallied around Paqueta for that period. So there was like a smidgen of sort of good togetherness from our players there. But I agree with what you've said about your evaluation of the Spurs game. In the ground, did it feel like a derby, or was it quite flat in the ground as well?
Again, the first 15 minutes, it did. And there was an atmosphere the first 15 minutes, and it felt like there was an extra bit of something, and then it went really quiet. And like I say, the boy got a little bit, just lost a bit of interest. At the beginning, it was the first time he'd gone to a West Ham Tottenham game. He's got a lot of friends at school at Tottenham. You could tell that it meant more to him than normal. It definitely was like, I want to win this game. So he was a little bit upset when they scored, and then he really wanted us to get back in it. So when we scored, he was really up for it. But then it just went a bit flat. And again, it plays part, doesn't it? That one thing I will say, I sat behind Graham Potter. Obviously, I was behind the bench. I actually recorded quite a few clips of him because obviously people said, well, Graham Potter expects one thing, but the players are not doing it. So I wanted to try and capture that on film a little bit, and give him his due. A lot of the time, in fact, do you know what? I've done the same with Moyes before. Sat behind the dugout. Moyes, you say, get up, squeeze up, push up. Graham Potter's doing exactly the same. It's almost like just exactly the same. The two managers who used to say, come on, get forward, get up. So I don't know whether there's something in there communication-wise, whether it's a mental thing that we're not confident enough to maybe push forward, whether it's players just playing how they want to play, I'm not sure. But it was very interesting watching Potter and seeing him and how he was with the team on the sideline. It was, he definitely was showing a bit of passion. He was definitely showing that he, was constantly communicating with the team, giving him instructions, constantly egging them on to try and get forward. So yeah, I don't know. Is it that the players aren't doing what he says, or is it something else? I don't know. But yeah, it was a really interesting dynamic, but it just went so flat for me. And, even even at the end there, when Ward-Prowse had that free kick, you just, I don't know, it was prime positioning, weren't it? You just thought maybe something's in the stars here that, you know, he's going to put this away, and we've all been waiting for this free kick of his, and, you know, for him to actually finally score one for us and everything else. And yeah, unfortunately, it looked fairly close from where I was, but apparently it was plenty wide. So yeah, it just come out feeling a bit like meh, to be honest with you.
It was meh. It was a meh performance, meh result. Anyway, hopefully you guys at home don't think this is a meh podcast. But if you do, I don't care. Well, I do, but for the next 10 seconds, I don't care. Regardless of if you thought it was a good one, a bad one, or a meh one, please do drop a like on it by clicking the thumbs up, subscribing to Hammers Chat. Thank you. So we'll catch up towards the end of the week. Take a look at the Man United game.
Sounds good.
Mini preview sounds good to me as well. But thank you very much for joining us at home. Don't be shy. Get involved in the comments below. That's what the comment section's for. It's for you to have your say. So come and have a chat with us, and we'll catch up with you in the comment section. See you in a bit.